1814, we took a little trip, along with Colonel Jackson down to mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in the town of New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept it coming. There wasn't nigh as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began running on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Ah, yes, the War of 1812. This is the war when we went to war with the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and the dependencies thereof. And stalemated. We stalemated this war, meaning it was a tie. Stalemate, stalemate, stalemate. Status quo antebellum. Stalemate. I wonder how those millions of jingoist bourgeoisie spangled asshats would like it if their precious football game ended in a stalemate. So did you hear who won between the Patriots and the 49ers? They tied. It was a stalemate, but it's all right. You know, at least they gained each other's respect. That's the important part. They gained each other's respect, and they genocided the shit out of the Creek Red Sticks Native Americans, so that way white folks can now live in Georgia and Alabama in peace. And I'm sure those white folks in Alabama will really civilize that place. Alabama, roll tide! Fucking idiots. So, let me ask you a question. If a nuclear winter actually happened, a nuclear winter, let me explain what that is to all you asshats. Okay, if a nuclear winter actually happened, and a nuclear winter is where one nuke is dropped, so let's just say North Korea gets a hair up their ass, and they're like, you know what, fuck whoever, and they drop a bomb, and then somebody else retaliates by dropping a bomb on them, and then someone else retaliates, and then everybody is dropping bombs all over the place, and then 100 nukes. That's the theory behind a nuclear winter. If 100 nukes are dropped in the world, and there's a huge black cloud that envelopes the entire world, keeping the sunlight from coming in onto this planet, which will kill all the plants, kill all the animals, and all of humanity will perish and will be wiped out. They're all dead. Everybody and everything. They're all dead. But the American flags that were made in China were still there. The small little tiny bits and scraps of cloth were still here on this earth, and nothing else was. Would that make you damn jingoistic, bourgeoisie, fat-ass, lazy, fair weather, spectator sport, assholes happy? Would you be okay with that? What good would that be? So aliens can come down here to admire our colorful, small little bits and scraps of cloth amongst all the rubble? Well, there appears something used to roam around this planet. Life used to be here. They seem to have really loved these little tiny colorful handkerchiefs to a fault. And then Trump, he says we need to make America great again. Status quo antebellum, make it great like it was in the past. Keep things the same like it was yesterday. During integration, or hell, let's just go full-on antebellum, when slavery was around. But don't you dare sit down for routine, mindless, perfunctory worshiping of that piece of cloth while the jingoists mutter some bullshit prayer they don't even know the meaning of nor the history of. So who's the politically correct crybaby bitches now? No, we're a bunch of little baby crybaby bitches. We need our safe space, weasel holes. Colin Kaepernick, don't do that. Boo-hoo, we're a bunch of politically correct hypocrites. It's only okay to move America backwards, not forwards, backwards. That's the only time change is necessary. Let's make America great again by going backwards. Now the Santa Clara Police Union. Have you heard of this? The Santa Clara Police Union are trying to strong-arm the 49ers. They say that they won't offer any of their police brutality to the 49er games if the 49ers don't sack Kaepernick. Oh no more of your police brutality. Oh no, what are we going to do? So they're going to be a bunch of politically correct little crybabies. Do the little bitty Santa Clara police unit need a safe space? You want to listen to politically correct speech? You need a little safe space, you little crybaby bitches. Remember when the NYPD stopped their patrols after that one guy shot 2 cops, and then everybody went fucking berserk? All right, you had Giuliani saying that it was Obama's fault, and then you had, everybody blamed Black Lives Matter, and all the right-wing blamed Black Lives Matter, and then one mentally, unstable guy killed his girlfriend, and then he killed 2 of the police officers, and they blamed it on the mayor, Bill de Blasio. They blamed it on Obama. They blamed it on everybody except for the one guy that did it. And they had a strike. So the NYPD had a strike after that one guy shot those 2 cops. And guess what? Violent crime, not only did the arrest go down, but crime went down too. So, yeah, go ahead, Santa Clara police. Stay away from the fucking games. I wouldn't want you there anyways. Y'all don't make anything better. I think we'd police ourselves better than you assholes can do anyways. Stay the fuck home. Don't go. I wouldn't miss y'all. And you want to know one way to really piss off those jingoistic bourgeoisie spangled ass clowns? Sing all 4 stanzas of the national anthem. Sing the entire fucking song. Because it'll take up 4 whole minutes of their life. And 4 minutes in, those damn jingoistic bourgeoisie fat-ass, laissez-faire weather spectator sport assholes would be like, enough of this national anthem bullshit. Let's get on with this goddamn football game already. I came here to watch a game. Hurry this bullshit up. Roll Tide. They'd go from being holier than thou, blindly obedient jingoists to complete savage barbarians in 0 to 60 flat. Status quo antebellum. And you know that those goddamned jingoistic bourgeoisie, fat-ass, laissez-faire weather spectator sport asshats don't know shit about the War of 1812, which is the war that the Star-Spangled Banner comes from. Francis Scott Key wrote it down, the slave owner, and the Black Marines, and Fort McHenry. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Alright, so I'm going to concede some things. The Star-Spangled Banner, the name of the song, which is also the name of our flag, it's a really nice name. It's refined. It's sophisticated. It's good. I like it. It's better than Stars and Stripes and Old Glory. Those are okay names, but Star-Spangled Banner. I mean, it took a while. Spangled. Who the fuck says spangled for anything? Does anybody ever use the word spangled for anything ever? It's way better than the Stars and Bars. The Stars and Bars, bitches, y'all can suck my dick. Okay? When I criticize my American government, it's because I want it to reform. When I criticize the Confederacy, oh my God, I don't want y'all to be here. I want y'all to leave. Why don't you leave? Right? Like Tomi, Lahren, leave. Why don't you just leave? So I'll concede that. I think it's a good name. And I'll also concede this. That 1814 poem that Frank Key, who owned 6 slaves, Francis Scott Key was a slave owner, it's kind of poetic. And even though the British lobbed 2,000 bombs on top of Fort McHenry during the attempted sack of Baltimore in 1814, the flag was still there. Yeah, all that is true. Every single bit of it. The British ships left with their tails between their legs. We suffered 24 injuries, and only 4 on our side died. That's it. And they had 330 of their men die. So they retreated, and we killed more of their men than they did of ours. So we win. Right? We won that battle. The 4 folks that we lost were Lieutenant Claggart and Sergeant Clem, and 1 African-American soldier, Private William Williams. And an unnamed woman was cut in half by a bomb as she carried supplies to the troops. So R.I.P. to Lieutenant Claggart, R.I.P. to Sergeant Clem, R.I.P. to that black private William Williams, and that unnamed woman who was cut in half by a bomb. That's just carrying supplies to the troops. And then think of the damage that was inflicted in that single battle. In the attempted sack of Baltimore, we sunk 22 of our own ships to clog up the Baltimore harbor, to block their ships from getting in. So we damaged 22 of our own ships as a defensive mechanism. Fort McHenry had 400 bombs that was dropped in it. There's 2,000 bombs lobbed, but a lot of them were bursting in there. Some of them actually bursted in the fort. So there are holy buildings everywhere in the fort. A lot of the buildings in the fort had holes in them. And two public buildings, two buildings that was outside of the fort in the town were destroyed. So at least two buildings were destroyed. Those are the things that our commanders admitted to. And that was just in the single Battle of Baltimore, a.k.a. Battle of Fort McHenry. But don't forget that this one singular battle that happened over a span of a few days was part of a larger 32-month war. A 32-month war that we started and ended in a stalemate, status quo antebellum. The War of 1812 is a war that we started. Little President Jimmy Madison, and I mean little tiny Jimmy, put little Jimmy in your pocket, little Jimmy Madison, and 19 of the 32 senators voted for it, as well as the majority of the House of Representatives. So back then, we the people, demanded that Congress declare the wars. Not so much today, and don't forget, while the majority of the House and the majority of the senators voted in favor of it, there were people that voted against it. 13 of the 32 senators voted against it, against the War of 1812. And if only 3 senators would have changed their mind, then the Senate would have ended in a stalemate, not the entire nation. But we, and we meaning our government, declared war on the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and all of her subjected territories and people. And it ended status quo antebellum, which means that all the previous borders would remain the same. Nothing was gained. No new territories. We weren't being threatened. We didn't repel any invaders. We didn't gain any new land. Nothing changed. Nothing. Except for all the bloodshed and all the money that we spent. It ended in a stalemate. Status quo antebellum. But the overall cost of the war. How many lives were lost? How much money? Our White House was burnt down to the ground. They burnt our White House down to the ground. That's what happened with the War of 1812. Right after they burnt down the White House was when the Battle of Baltimore happened. So that was like barely saved our own asses by the skin of our teeth. Like, holy shit. They just burned down our White House. And Tecumseh was assassinated. Those are the two biggest things that I remember about the War of 1812. But how many American soldiers died? 2,260. 2,260 American soldiers and sailors were killed in battle. 2,260 individual souls. Their lives ceased to exist. And 60% of those 2,260 Americans were Kentuckians. And so even if the majority of my Kentucky brethren don't know shit about the War of 1812, I do. And it was fucking bullshit. Just because Kentucky senator, slave-owning Henry Clay, that aristocratic fucking lawyer piece of shit, who owned at least 60 slaves at one point. So he's like a big slave owner. Francis Scott Key only owned 6. He wasn't a Henry Clay slave owner. He wanted some of that American Revolutionary fame. Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun, little Jimmy Madison, they all pushed us into a war that we didn't need to get into. And then ultimately, Tecumseh is dead, just like many of the first nations of our country are. Our White House is burnt down to the ground, as was the Library of Congress. All that history is completely lost, including stories about the Pilgrims. The President's house was burnt down to the ground. Our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., was sacked to pieces, to smithereens. We had no capital. It was all burnt to hell. In fact, President Little Jimmy Madison and his family had to run away. And of course, over 1,000 Kentucky soldiers were killed. At least 1,000 Kentucky soldiers were killed. 4,500 Americans, 4,505 Americans were wounded. Every single death, every single life matters. All lives matter. And eventually, from disease, from the wounds, 15,000 Americans would die. 15,000. That's how many Americans died for Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. You know who John C. Calhoun is? If you're at Yale, you got buildings with his name on it. 15,000 Americans died, and that's about the size of the entire population of Washington, D.C. in the 1830s. So it would be like wiping out Washington, D.C. in the 1830s, so 2 decades later. 15,000 American lives were sacrificed over a stalemate, over status quo antebellum. The war cost, the amount of money, it cost the United States about $100 to $200 million. And that would be $1.5 to $3 billion today. Then the strain of having to raise all of that money forced our government to charter a second national bank, which took our country into another step towards greater centralization. And for what? What the fuck did we get out of the War of 1812? This is the reason why you don't know shit about the War of 1812, because overall, we started it, and then we ended it in a tie. I would say that's a loss. You start the damn war, and you don't get what the hell you started it for? Just so Henry Clay can further his career? So little Jimmy Madison can win his re-election campaign? For that rabid, racist, psycho John C. Calhoun? Yale, why the fuck would you not change the names of the buildings that have John C. Calhoun's name on them? Connecticut? Are you fucking kidding me? He's a representative of South Carolina. John C. Calhoun, he defended slavery, and his ideas greatly influenced the South's secession from the United States. That's why 1,000 Kentuckians had to die to help out John C. Calhoun's senator or House of Representative career, just so he could get the name on all those Yale buildings. And Yale, man, what the fuck are you all doing? You're in Connecticut, for God's sakes. John C. Calhoun was a House Representative of South Carolina. What in the fuck does John C. Calhoun have to do with Connecticut? That would be the North. Right? If you fought on the North, why would you take any Confederate pride? Why would you do that? It's bullshit, okay? It's bullshit that this war happened. This war was a war to kill Tecumseh and to kill a whole bunch of Native Americans to take their land so that a bunch of white folks could live in Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Georgia, and Alabama in peace. Without these damn native, pesky, red-skinned people around them. We couldn't integrate them. We couldn't say, let's live together as neighbors. No, we didn't want to do that. Just easier just to kill them. Just go over there and murder them all. Kill them all and push them into reservations if there's a few survivors. And that's why Canada was invaded too. So we invaded Canada. We wanted to take over all their land. We wanted all the land of the Native Americans. So that way we could get Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Georgia, and Alabama. It was an imperialistic adventure. We wanted people's lands. We wanted to kill Native Americans. Some people might try to say that the War of 1812 had to do with the impressment of American sailors into the British Empire. And that happened. That's true. But you're going to tell me that's the fucking point of the war? That's the fucking point. Okay. I'm going to debunk that just real quick. First of all, the number of American sailors that were impressed into the British Navy are greatly exaggerated. There's a few hundred sailors that were impressed. That's true. But if that was the only reason for the War of 1812, then we would have ended that war after only a few months into it, because those were the peace terms that were offered in the early months of the war. Great Britain says, all right, we'll stop impressing your sailors. And the United States returned with, fuck you. We still want to go with this war. We still like what we're doing here. We think we can get more than just stopping you from impressing our sailors. We think we can get Canada, and we think we can take out the West. And take out the Native Americans in Georgia and Alabama. And maybe take Florida too. So, the Treaty of Ghent, the one that actually ended the war, that didn't even guarantee that the impressment of American sailors wouldn't happen anymore. So the status quo antebellum, the peace that we actually signed on to, didn't even stop the impressment of sailors. So they offered the peace terms in the very beginning of the war, in the very first few months. We said no to that, and then eventually, after 2.5 years went by, we said, fuck it. Let's just stop the war. Nobody wins. Let's just stop killing each other, all right? So, no, I don't believe that impressment of sailors bullshit. The War of 1812 was an imperialist adventure to take Native American lands and to attempt to invade and take over Canada. And, frankly, I think Thomas Jefferson thought that it would just be marching up there. And they thought that a lot of the Canadians used to be Americans. And they went up there for some cheap land and a little bit of taxes. And so they thought they would be like, oh, yay, we want to be a part of America. Enough of the British Empire. So we're just going to march in there, say, here we are, we're the liberators, kind of like Iraq, right? We will be welcomed as liberators. So a lot of Native Americans, Tecumseh, that's the biggest one, and I'm going to actually make a couple more videos just to highlight all the Native American tribes that were killed and destroyed because of the War of 1812. That's the fucking reason. That was the fucking reason right there. That's why Kentucky was in it, to kill the Native Americans. The British, they didn't care. They said, oh, the British clearly must be paying these damn savages. Yeah, we've stole their land. Yeah, we raped their women and killed their children. Yeah. But they're killing us because Britain is making them do it. There are 32 tribes here in Kentucky. 32 tribes. So, and then think about what would happen to Canada. Let's say we would have actually invaded Canada and took it over. What would have happened to their First Nation Aboriginal people? They would have been genocided just like the American Native Americans were. And isn't that a weird term, Native American? America existed after the Native Americans existed. Native Americans have been here 14,000 to 10,000 years. And then America gets here in 1700s. So we've been, the nation has been here for 300 years, 400 years, 300, 400, less than 200, 1776. It's about 250 years. So 14,000 years, and we're going to name them the Native Americans because our nation took over their country. It's a weird name. And then the War of 1812, this 1814 poem, which is put on top of a British melody. We were fighting the British, but we're going to sing the anthem over a British melody, a drinking song that the aristocrats, the British aristocrats in 1775, when they were bombing the United States, would sing. That's the song that we sing at our football games today. And you're telling me that all those assholes there, they know the meaning behind the song, the war behind the song, the history behind the song? Status quo antebellum. And one more caveat, fuck the name. War of 1812, the war wasn't just in 1812, the war lasted for 32 months, over 2.5 years. So the United States was at war in 1812, and 1813, and 1814, and 1815. The name War of 1812 is a misnomer. It's a horrible name for the war. It makes it sound like that it started and ended in the same year. But it didn't. Maybe James Madison's war, Henry Clay and John Calhoun's war, the War of the Whigs. The War of 1812 went on for 32 months following the U.S. declaration of war on Britain and Ireland in June of 1812. 32 months. It don't sound like that's that long, but it's longer than the Mexican-American War. It's longer than the Spanish-American War, and it's even longer than the U.S. involvement in World War I. Longer than the U.S. involvement in World War I. Longer than the Mexican-American War. Longer than the Spanish-American War. War of 1812. It's getting up there, right? 32 months. Here's a quote by a surgeon named Tiger Dunlop, the 89th Regiment of Foot, about the War of 1812 to give you a perspective to put you there in the historical context. Here's his words. There is hardly on the face of the earth a less enviable situation than that of an army surgeon after a battle, worn out and fatigued in body and mind, surrounded by suffering, pain and misery, much of which he knows it is not in his power to heal. I never underwent such fatigue as I did the first week at Butler's barracks. The weather was intensely hot, the flies in myriads, and lighting on the wounds deposited their eggs so that maggots were bred in a few hours. So lots of injured soldiers and lots of flies and lots of maggots and very few doctors. Tecumseh was killed in 1813, and he died far away from his home. He was either born in Kentucky or Ohio, and he died in the Battle of the Thames near Chatham, Ontario, in Canada. He died in Canada. And one of his quotes, that Shawnee war chief from the Ohio River Valley, said this: "Live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart." And now we have Native Americans fighting for their people and their ancestral homelands again in North Dakota. Will we Americans treat the Native Americans any fucking different this time? There's rape, there's poverty, there's drunkenness. There's a lot of shit that's happening on these reservations. Yeah, for some of the 1%, they get casinos and shit, but not all of them are getting the proceeds. Just easier to put them on their own little concentration camp, right? So I think we need to listen to the Sioux. There's the 7 tribes of the Sioux are now in North Dakota, trying to stop that pipeline. Go around them. Let them keep their fucking land. It'd be like a person who tied themselves up to a tree. You could try to trick them, try to say, look over there, and then they walk away, then you cut the tree. But you know what? You might just have to let them have that tree. You get to keep your tree. And Native Americans should keep their tree. If we actually listen to history and what the War of 1812 taught us, we gain nothing from it, except for a lot of blood and a lot of injustice. And without the War of 1812, the Aboriginal Canadians would have suffered the same fate. So for Canada, this was a war against the Americans. This helped create their nation, the Canadian nation. The War of 1812 added to their national identity. There was a U.S. history teacher I asked, is there any of the wars that America's ever been a part of that you thought was just? And he said the first Persian Gulf War and the War of 1812. Those are his 2 wars. He's a U.S. history teacher. He's teaching this shit to your kids. Out of all the wars that's ever been fought in America, I was both perplexed and, it was only 2 wars, so I was impressed and perplexed, because Howard Zinn talks about the 3 holy wars: American Revolution, World War II, and the Civil War. Those are the wars that you can never criticize. But not the War of 1812. And he thought that only the War of 1812 was just. And he mentioned the impressment of the sailors. So get the fuck out of here. That's bullshit. What I know for certain, when it comes to war, if we don't put an end to war, war is going to put an end to us. And we, as an American nation, have been at war for the last 15 years, making the global war on terror the longest. And so, therefore, clearly, the most significant war we've ever fought in our entire lives, in entire history. The global war on terror, 15 fucking years strong. War of 1812 was 32 months, 2.5 years. And how many 2.5s can fit into 15? 6. So we've had 6 War of 1812s packed into this one global war on terror. And what have we